What is up, guys? It is a brand new year, 2023, which we already established that, but it still is. And today we're going to be talking about the best way to get your speakers to sound. How are you doing today, Joseph?
It's the end of January in a new year. Nick,
Soon to be
I
another
think we,
new year.
we're about to start a new month. So life is good at the moment. I'm excited to have an exciting show and talk a little bit about what's our topic. What are
Hey,
we talking about tonight, Nick?
So today we want to talk about how to get the best sound out of your speakers, right? So there's all kinds of different ways to get the best sound out of your speakers. And today we're going to be mentioning some of the ways that we think is the best way to do that. And now we're going to be focusing mainly on DIY speakers, both car and home audio. However, a lot of the stuff that we talk about is stuff that you can do to your own speakers at home. So if you have speakers that you think, well, hey, maybe they could sound just a little bit better. Well, this is actually going to be one of those shows where this type of stuff that we're talking about can translate to that.
Fantastic. Do we have any of our regular viewers in the chats? I see Regular Guy Audio. I see the true voice of reason. Stu is here. It's always good to see Stu in the chat. Nice to have a good crowd going in the chat. So hopefully this will be a fun and interesting show.
Yeah. And now some of this stuff is stuff that we're going to be talking about that maybe you know, but some of this I hope is actually going to be new for a lot of people. So I don't want to focus on everything that people already know about. Now, a lot of this stuff is stuff that we either have researched or stuff that we have a lot of firsthand knowledge over that we've been doing for a long time. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start talking about it.
And if you wonder why Nick seems a little bit distracted, and we were quickly at the last minute saying, "Well, how are we going to explain this?" And we're both got SketchUp pulled up, and we're both pulling up SketchUp models.
So I have no idea what you're talking about.
Show what we're talking about. And I'm, let me pull up this website so we can show this thing off. So we're, I don't know, we're extremely prepared for tonight's show. We've been planning it for months.
So the funny thing is, like, we are actually very, very prepared for this show, but we also realized that as we started explaining it to each other, we were like, you know what? Someone else might not quite understand what the heck we're talking about. Maybe we should have visually.
You just have to visualize some things. And that's one thing I like about doing video and putting videos up on YouTube is I can say words and people go, "What are you talking about?" But I can show a picture and people go, "I still don't understand what you're talking about." But at least the picture looks nice. So
at least the picture looks nice. That's exactly right. All right. So let's start talking, because you said you had some stuff on car audio that I'm not really familiar with. So do you want to start us off with maybe some car audio stuff? I'm very curious what you have to say.
I'm not sure where to start. And I know I don't want to cover too much old ground that we've talked about before. And kind of where I want to begin. How do you get speakers to sound good? And it is my opinion. Here's my hot take. You're free to disagree with the hot take that it is a million times easier and cheaper to get good quality sound in home versus car. I wager that an individual could take, say, $500, go buy a little hi-fi amp off of Parts Express, buy a pair of halfway decent speakers, or even a halfway decent kit and build it yourself, and sit in a room and have your speakers 5 feet in your direction and kind of like form a triangle, aim the speakers at yourself, sit down in a comfortable chair, close your eyes, and enjoy your music. And you can't do that in a car because every speaker in a car, especially stock locations, is just in the wrong place.
Yeah, you have a lot less leeway of where you can place your speakers. So your environment has a much greater impact on the sound quality than it may in a home. Although I would still say most homes are not designed well for speakers either. But you're right. You have a lot of interaction and a lot of close interaction.
A lot of homes aren't designed well for home theater. Like my living room, for example, has a fireplace in the middle of it. And if I were designing the house, there wouldn't have been a fireplace there. We've never used it. I would have had a spot for a big giant TV there. And so it would be a real pain. And I've lived places as well where like hooking up surround sound would be nearly impossible.
So first of all, I just want to thank RGA for the thought. He said, "Hey, I would donate $20, but I pulled my card from Google and all my cash out of the bank." And that's cool, man. We are happy with you guys tuning in. If you guys do find this data at all useful, please feel free to super chat us. It does let us know that what we're doing here is stuff that you enjoy and stuff that you need to know. Now, this is stuff that, like I said, I don't think you're going to get a lot of other places. So let's go ahead and first start talking about. You had mentioned the room that you're going to place it in, and we've talked about that a little bit. But I do want to talk about the actual enclosure shape because
right. How do you build it so it sounds good?
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. Now, in car audio and home audio, we have some similarities and some differences. And some of the differences are in car audio is because of location, right?
Mm-hmm. Right, right. And I think about a car door. Car doors just aren't designed with audio in mind. And sometimes automotive engineers will work on that space and make it better than others, but for the most part, it's just a big leaky metal box. And sheet metal, is not your first choice for building speaker enclosures.
Although it can be, but not that metal. Not metal that's designed to crush on the face. Yeah,
we're not talking about 1/4-inch thick steel, right? We're talking about sheet metal in a car, and it's hey, we got a super chat.
We did. Thank you, David K. Don't forget, everybody. Don't forget to hit that like button, and I'm going to keep that up unless we get another one. Hey, what's up? Living Loud with Andy. So yeah, you're right, and so you're limited on the shape. So let's start talking about what the ideal shape is for any speaker. So when we talk about speakers, I don't care if we're talking car audio. I don't care if we're talking home audio. There is actually what is considered the golden ratio. And this golden ratio, go ahead.
We've talked about it before, and I've expressed my doubts that a golden ratio exists.
I know, but this golden ratio,
a Fibonacci sequence, right?
Yeah, and the golden ratio goes all the way back to the ancient Egyptians. Believe it or not, all the way back there in the pyramids. And what we're trying to do with the golden ratio, and actually what we're trying to do with any of these things, are we're trying to reduce resonance. And most of the times with speakers, one of the main things to do is reduce resonance. Now, there are other things such as crossover that we might get into if we have time. But first thing is talking about reducing resonance. The best way to do that is with the golden ratio. That's one of the first ways to start with the right size cabinet. So when we take into account resonances, this is the architectural design dating back to the Egyptian periods. This is that ratio. The height is
Illuminati
2.6.
Confirmed.
Yes, Illuminati. Height 2.6, width 1.6, depth 1. Okay, so that's a ratio, right? So 2.6 to 1. So every 1 inch deep should be 2.6 inches high. Every 1 inch deep should be 1.6 inches wide. That's going to be the best. Now, what's the worst? You know the worst, right? I can't
say I've ever seen a speaker designed with those dimensions. It's like I can't say I've ever seen an enclosure with roughly those dimensions. I'm looking at the ones behind you with those Fountex in there. They are deeper than they are wide, and look like they're deeper than they are tall.
So here's the deal. The golden ratio is not always followed, but it's important to understand why we want that golden ratio by looking at the absolute worst ratio. So you know what the worst ratio is, correct?
I'm thinking just a rectangular prism of equal dimensions every direction.
Right. So like a square.
Yeah. But it's a box, so it can't be a square. A cube. That's the word I'm looking for.
A cube. That's it. Yeah. Cube.
I know words. I've used them in the past. I have all the best words.
Yes. A cube is absolutely worse.
Blake's. I can't start from here. Blake's comment, the golden ratio is visually appealing. It works well because it's irrational. But it's a ratio. How can a ratio be irrational? I thought irrational meant it couldn't be expressed as a ratio.
So we will talk about this later. Okay.
Oh, start that one then. We'll come back to it.
Yeah, I will, but I want to make sure he knows. So here's the deal. The reason why a square is so illogical to design and bad to design for that regards is because sound is based on waves, and waves have lengths to them.
Right.
So 20 hertz has a length associated with that wave, 20 kilohertz, 1 kilohertz, all of them are different size waves. Whenever we have the dimensions of the box the exact same dimension,
Right, a perfect
then
cube,
those
internally a cube.
So yeah, the internal cube, let's say 5 inch by 5 inch by 5 inch, then that frequency at 5 inches will negatively be impacted at that frequency. So it will create
You're going to get a standing wave inside the box.
Or dips. Yep, you'll get a standing wave inside the box at that frequency, which is going to greatly affect your performance of whether that be the mid-range, whether that be your woofer, whether that, well, your tweeter's usually already sealed. And so
I'm going to interrupt you, Nick.
Hold on.
Okay.
Let me just finish this last sentence. So the golden ratio is designed in a way that should break up the waves the most.
Okay. Nick, the wavelength for bass frequencies is huge. It's like feet.
Yeah.
So like is there even enough space inside of an enclosure for the wave to propagate and have a full like cycle and bounce back as a full cycle?
That's a good question. So you're saying for a subwoofer.
Okay, okay. So people oftentimes ask in my comments, send me messages and ask, hey, is it okay if I have a big port outside of the box? It's a big long port outside of the box. Or how does the port have to be close to the subwoofer? Does it matter where the port's placed relative to the subwoofer? The answer I've always given and always thought and assumed was that the wavelength for a bass frequency is so large that with a subwoofer, you'd have to have the port opening 20 feet away from the woofer, from the driver, for it to have a negative impact on the sound. And well, that's kind of impractical. And so if you're, a foot away, it shouldn't make any difference. And of course, if you're in a car where you've got waves bouncing off of surfaces inside the car, it makes no difference whatsoever. Yes, you can aim it inside a car and get more bass and turn it around, side firing, drivers up, port back in an SUV. But it just seems to me that with a subwoofer, that shouldn't make any difference. The golden ratio shouldn't matter.
For a subwoofer, yeah, and you're right. For most subwoofers, we're not creating large enough boxes for it to be an issue. So we're talking more like mid-range woofers, those that are going to play typically a mid-range more than anything else. But typically the ones that are going to be playing in that frequency, or if we're crossing over, say like a woofer at like 1 kilohertz, that could also be an issue because, you're going to want that to be probably at least 2/3 of whatever the issue is that you're at. So if the frequency is, say, 1.5 kilohertz, where we're having the issue inside the box internally, then you really want to be at at least 750 hertz if you can. So that way you can get it.
Where this really matters is when you're building a home speaker or when you're putting it's the mids and highs, right? When you're building a bookshelf speaker or when you're trying to put a driver inside of a car door or other panel inside of a car, that's where this becomes really important.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I agree with that.
Okay. So I'm down with your golden ratio now. You've convinced me that it's not a complete bunch of hooey.
Well, and here's the deal. The golden ratio, although is absolutely the best, doesn't mean that you have to. Just use the basic thought process, okay? If my width is 5 inches and my height is 5 inches, well, hey, the waveform is going to be the same. If my width is 5 and my height is 10, well, that's going to be probably problematic too, because now we're at a multiple of 5.
Multiples. That's where I was going to go next. If you've got multiples, you've got the same problem. So you can't have multiples. You've got to find prime numbers.
Yeah, try not to. Yeah, I mean the best thing is to try not to. Otherwise, you're going to have issues still at those frequencies. Less of an issue, but still issues. So if we're going for the absolute best sound, then golden ratio or something similar would be the best thing to go for.
I'm going to have to test the prime number theory.
I want to see it.
Yeah, that's. I think that's something we could test.
I agree. So now that we know that boxes are an issue and like a cube is an issue,
right?
We know that there's probably, and anytime we have equal distances, that's going to be an issue. Well, that's going to be a problem because almost always our mid-range cavity inside our speaker box is some type of square of some kind, right?
Right. So I got a question for you. As I'm thinking through this, years ago when I kind of first got my channel going, someone had asked a question. Yes, it does.
This is what we're going to be talking about next. So you're absolutely right.
Right. Someone had asked this question, and I just kind of dismissed it as nothing worth really getting deep into. But the individual asked if a pyramid shape, because pyramids apparently have certain mystical abilities, would be the best way to build an enclosure. And what I'm hearing is, well, a pyramid should be pretty well symmetric, right? It's a four-sided figure where all the sides are going to be the same size, right? So a pyramid would actually be a terrible enclosure.
A pyramid is actually really bad. Yep. A pyramid, and that's been tested. And a lot of the stuff that we're talking about, guys, you can actually read right in this book, Loudspeaker Design Cookbook, 7th edition. I linked it down below. A lot of the stuff we're talking about, I linked down in the description. You're going to want to look those up. And anyone that wants to get serious about their sound, this is how you can do it. And we're going to talk about the mid-range cavity next because Blake is right. Hey, it also affects mid-ranges and dash pods. So if we know that anytime the size is the same, that becomes an issue, what can we do about that? And so if you're going.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I want to hear what you
cut you off.
No, I'm good.
So I'm going to tell you what I think about this. So you know that I'm not a huge fan of polyfill. Okay. The reason why I'm not a fan of polyfill is I don't believe the story that if you have a subwoofer box that's too small, that you can put some polyfill in it and solve all your problems. But I think polyfill still has its place to break up standing waves. And I think that when you're building a dash pod of some sort, you need to put something inside the dash pod to break up those standing waves. And I think polyfill is the way to go.
Yeah. And I don't want to get to polyfill yet, but I hear right. So let's still stick with the enclosure shape before we jump too much into what can we do after we do the enclosure shape. So if we're building
when you're shaping a dash pod, you have to shape the dash pod to fit into the car. You're beholden to the automobile.
Not internally.
Explain.
Well, you have to create the dash pod to fit the external part of the dash, but internally you can make changes to how that sound is going to propagate inside there, how those sound waves are going to propagate. So, for example, let's take this.
Okay. We have an object lesson.
Yep.
Okay.
So this speaker right here has a subwoofer on the side, and then it has a mid-range cavity. So if I did a mid-range cavity that was square right here, just cut off here, and then put a square in the back, then those waves are all going to propagate at the same time.
Right.
So what can we do? We can create unparalleled surfaces inside here that will break up the surfaces. So we can do that quite a few different ways, but one of the most prevalent ways, it's the way that SVS Ultra does up their towers, which is actually very genius.
Okay.
Is they take and they slant the back instead. So with the back now slanted to the mid-range cavity, now internally, doesn't matter what the external dimensions are, internally those waves are being broken up. We could also slant the sides at different angles, break it up more, or in a dash pod or something like that, we could make the dash pod whatever we want and even put stuff in there that just slanted inside. Doesn't have to be necessarily the back that can break up the waves.
So let me ask a question about that. You can put something in it to break up the waves. And my question is, how effective is egg crate foam sound dampening material for breaking up waves inside of an enclosure?
Let's not get there yet, but let's get there later.
Okay, we'll put a pin in that one.
I'll put a pin in that one. Because I think the important thing first is to get the enclosure right. Because the truth of the matter is there's all kinds of ways to get rid of resonance, right? Which we're going to talk about in car doors and here. But the first thing is how do we break up those sound waves the most inside those doors? And part of that is the shape of the box. And so if we get the shape of the box right first, the rest of the things will just be icing on the top.
Right. Do you really need anything in the box if the box is right?
And I would argue that probably you do, but it'll make this even better of a response. And so what we're talking about is getting our response as linear as possible, so there's not like big peaks and dips in the response, right? And these are some of the ways we're doing that. And what do you think about what Andy said?
I really think everyone who's into speakers at all should invest in that book.
Oh, thank you, Jacob. Travis said, "Hey, thanks for filling my ears with knowledge while I cook and clean. I wish he was over here cooking. I am hungry. I'm starving. I will fill your ears with more knowledge. Let's eat."
We'll talk speakers for my supper.
Yeah, seriously. Okay, so all right, so we're talking about the enclosures. We've talked about how to break some things up. I want to talk about something that you know a lot about, which is bracing.
Okay.
So what do you want to tell me about bracing? Because I think we both have a bunch of knowledge on bracing the cabinet.
My issue with bracing is I think that most subwoofer box builders and other YouTube personalities will build boxes and show off a bunch of elaborate and complicated bracing and say the bracing makes the box strong, the bracing makes the box strong. It does make the box strong, but it's not like you're trying to hold up the space shuttle with this box. It's strong enough as it is. You don't add bracing to make the box strong. It can make the box strong. It does make the box strong, but you add bracing for one reason and one reason only. And I bet you know exactly what that is.
Enlighten me.
Because it looks pretty on YouTube. No,
that's why I put lipstick on my bracing.
Exactly. No, the bracing is there to break up the panel of the enclosure into smaller size panels to change the frequencies they resonate at, so you don't have one big panel resonating at one specific frequency.
All right.
Am I crazy?
No, yeah, you're absolutely right. So we have 4 different types.
I'm not crazy.
Yeah, this thing's going crazy over here, right? Sorry. There's 4 different types of bracing here. And we're going to be talking about these because some of these don't look like bracing. Like this one over here doesn't look like bracing. And this one over here doesn't look like bracing. So let's talk about what bracing means. Bracing, in the terminology that we're using, we're not using it in the terminology of making the cabinet stronger. We're talking about how does it affect the sound quality and breaking up standing waves. So let's talk about this one first. This is corner bracing. Now, you and I both agree that corner bracing for structural integrity is, not a good idea. Not a great idea.
You know, a video I did a couple of weeks ago where I talked about how if you don't make all your cuts at once, your cuts are going to be off because you're just the accuracy issues that you reset a saw. If that's you and you've done a bad job of cutting and building your enclosure, then maybe you need that to overcome a bad build. And if you're worried about air leaks, if you're cutting these things freehand with a circular saw and you've got gashes and waves and stuff, something like that might be useful to fill in air gaps. So there's some reasons to do it that way. But again, if you've built the box right, you don't need that piece there for strength. You need it for what?
So this is another way to break up standing waves. It's not necessarily the way that I would do it, but all of these in conjunction can be used. So you can use some of these in certain parts of your box, some in other parts. So let's talk about what this does. This basically allows the panels to be coupled together. The 2 panels we coupled together and allows them for a better way of dissipating energy. So that's all that's designed to do is help dissipate energy, which will help break up the waveforms or help the waveforms from not getting outside of the box. There's also this one, which a lot of
Can you
people
go
have
back to
never
that
seen.
first one real quick?
Okay, that's called corner bracing, by the way. Sorry,
Okay,
corner bracing.
so and people in the world of woodworking and building things would call it something entirely different. They would call it a batten, as in batten down the hatches.
Or like Baton Rouge.
Yeah. Batten means stick, right? Baton Rouge, that means stick, right? Red stick, right? That's
Wow.
all the foreign language skills that I have right there, because I think Baton Rouge is cool.
Let's not beat people down because of that. Jeez. All right,
We're
we're just gonna beat this into you.
I was about to make a joke about we're not Memphis police officers. We're not going to hit anybody with our baton.
Yeah, we'll not do that one.
Let's stay away from that. And what we do in car audio is we want to try to make corner 45s out of those, but you don't have to, right? You can get the effect without it.
Yeah, no, it's literally just to couple those two sides together. So really whatever side. And by the way, these are not any specific shape or whatever. This is literally just designed. And we're actually going to talk about how some of these shapes are, well, actually, all these shapes are actually pretty good, actually designed, but not on purpose. So these ones right here are pretty interesting. A lot of people have never seen these. These are little shelf braces. Have you ever seen these?
I've used them inadvertently after doing a sloppy job of doing some cutting. And so I'm excited to know they're valid. And
they are.
I don't know what to call it, but it looks to me like you're trying to add mass to the panel.
So it's a shelf brace. And all it is just trying to break up the waves once again. You're creating spots in the internal cavity of the speaker that are going to break up different size waves. So if you're going to do these, you're going to want, and we're going to talk about bracing in general, you don't want them equidistant. You want them to be at varying distances, right? So you'd want these at varying distances, varying heights, but they don't touch any other panel. They just go on the side panel. And that's it. That's designed for that. Then we have a cross brace, which a lot of people are interested in. And cross brace actually typically is actually down the center, the two centers. I did this one with the sides, so this is not quite really a cross brace, but cross brace usually you see downside. But the basic premise is to couple the four sides together. Once again, break up resonances. And then finally, what a lot of people see is a window brace. And when you do a window brace, a lot of times, and I do this as well, especially on the channel because it looks pretty, is you make them all the same. So like you'd make this all four squares in here cut out, or two squares. And really, once again, you should be alternating these, changing these so that, once again, it creates more of an area to break up standing waves. They should not be equidistant.
So that one we typically call a window brace, do you know what Vance Dickinson calls that kind of brace?
Did I not say
you said the word before, but in his now
I can't remember
where he
I can't remember what he calls
of the brace with the windows. He specifically calls it a shelf brace.
A shelf brace, yeah.
So Vance Dickinson calls that one a shelf brace. It ties in three of the sides together. And I've seen that used in a commercial speaker before. Where
you know what? I think I called the horizontal brace a shelf brace on accident. I'm sorry. The horizontal brace was the one that the second one I talked about.
Gotcha.
And then
gotcha.
Sorry. That was my mistake. I said the wrong thing. This happens when you're live. A lot of people don't realize that. When you're live, you just say something, then next thing you know, everyone's like, you said the wrong thing. I'm like, well, yeah, I didn't go back and edit it. I'm not talking to the live camera.
Yeah. Sometimes you make these little verbal snafus and cafus and stuff, and that's okay. It's just part of going live. Is you're going to say stupid things, and so that's part of it.
So once again, you don't want to put like one of the worst places to brace your box, which is it's not worse in the essence of strength or rigidity, but for what we're talking about, resonances, is directly in the center, because all it has done is broken those waves in two, and now you've doubled the one's frequency of whatever you're having an issue at.
So let's say you had a big panel, and let's say it was resonating it. I'm just making up a number here. I don't know the actual math this one panel is resonating at, let's say, 80 hertz. If you
Sure.
take your bracing and put it right in the middle of the panel, dead middle, and you do one of those nice fancy window braces, you've now created two panels, and those two panels are going to resonate at, say, I don't know, 160 hertz. Now you've got two panels both resonating at 160. And so all you've effectively done at that point is moved your resonance from 80 up to 160, and you haven't quietened it down. But if you offset the brace so it's not in the middle of the panel, you've now got one side resonating at, I don't know, 100 and the other resonating at 250. And so they're going to resonate at different levels, and their volume is not going to add up in sum.
Exactly. Because the more that you have resonating at the same frequency, the more, exactly what you said, they'll add up and they'll sum together so that it becomes worse. And that's why we see like building a cube, is the absolute worst frequency. And it is also a problem with diffraction, which we did not talk about, but someone had mentioned that earlier.
Right.
Where he said, hey, how does the hemisphere, do you still get diffraction off the circular midsection? And if we have time, we'll talk about that. I don't know if we'll be able to, but if you haven't seen that, I did a whole video on diffraction. You should just watch that.
So I think a good way to think about this, let's say you build a rectangle, right? So it's not a cube. I've already solved that problem. If you take a brace and put it in the middle of the rectangle, you've made two cubes. Right? So why would you, if a cube is a bad idea, why would you go through the trouble of building a rectangle to turn around and make two cubes? That's the way to think about it. So you want to offset the bracing. So here I've got the standard kind of window brace, which honestly we do because it looks pretty on camera and on Facebook and on Instagram. And right here is one that I think is effective because it's so simple and underused. And if you go through the loudspeaker design cookbook, both of these right here, Vance Dickinson calls a shelf brace. And this style right here, where it's just a brace that's there, I've seen that done before. I used to have an old Polk Audio 10-inch subwoofer. I took it apart. I'd filmed it. This is back when I was first kind of playing with starting a channel, and I'm holding the camera while trying to take things apart, and it looked like crap, and so I never did anything with it. But literally inside of that enclosure, it's mostly a cube. And in the middle of that cube is this big flipping board. If you take the amp off the back, you can't see the subwoofer because this huge board takes up over, fills up almost half the enclosure. I don't know why I'm pointing at it with my hand and not on screen, but it was basically a huge board. It looked a lot like this. And it took, there was plenty of gap left for the port to work. And that box was heavy, even though it was just made out of relatively, I think it was particle board.
Oh, yeah.
And that's fantastic bracing. And I have taken braces like this, my home theater subwoofer. I, tapped on the top and had a big panel. I thought that doesn't sound good. And I went and put some of these in it and mismeasured, and they didn't quite touch the sides. And I thought I'd messed up. But now after seeing your example, I'm glad that I haven't.
And I'm going to mention
you this.
Oh, before you go, I'm going to mention just in general, if you want to see a good designed speaker for the things that we're talking about, I linked to the SVS Ultra Tower, and a lot of things that we're going to be talking about, they did on that speaker, which is one of the reasons why I really like those tower speakers. So if you're not into DIY, that's a good design to at least look at and emulate. Go ahead, Justin.
I just read Stu's comment. We spend an awful lot of time and energy designing enclosures to make speakers do what we want them to do. Have you ever thought to ask speakers what they want to do? So Stu apparently is an advocate of consent, so we have to have consent.
I actually spend hours just discussing it with my speaker before we build anything. I'm like, what do you want to do?
All right, here's your standard corner 45 right here.
Yeah.
Which we've all seen. And again, I'm of the opinion we do this because the batten you showed earlier is just as effective as this. And when we see all these videos and pictures on Instagram, there's never corner 45s along this wall here. There are always these vertical ones, right? If we need one in this wall, then don't we need one on all the walls? Why is this wall special? Why are the rest of the walls strong and this one weak?
Yeah, in general, if we're talking about for breaking up, what we're trying to do, which is to help dissipate energy, it doesn't really matter just on those, as long as it's connected to two walls, as long as the walls are connected in some way, shape, or form, it should help dissipate energy. And that's why when we're talking about, like, this is a good designed box, what we're looking at here, because he's not just using one form of bracing, he's using multiple different forms of bracing to help dissipate those internal resonances. And that's a good thing to do.
Have you ever seen a brace like this triangle brace?
Oh yeah, sure.
So you want to know where I found out how to do these, where I got the idea for this one from?
Not at all. Just kidding.
Okay,
Yes,
good. No problem. Since Andy is down in the chat, I guarantee Andy knows where this came from. Is Andy in the chat still? Right.
Is it from Kicker or Andy?
It's when I bought a Kicker Comp R and I opened up the book, the manual, and they actually give you a decent owner's manual. Way to go, Kicker. And in it, they describe a box. Build it just like this. You'll be fine. Here's the dimensions, everything you need to know, the port and everything. And they recommend using a brace that's just a triangle jammed to the corner like this.
Nice. Well, I mean, it should, and I would just do that anywhere not center, once again, to help break up standing waves that do hit it.
And you could put 2 in that corner and 1 in some other corner and just offset them. Here is one that I see used a lot. Again, it looks good on Instagram. You just basically take a piece of wood and stick it against the wall. Right. And you break up the panel resonance.
Yeah. Once again, and that's called a horizontal brace. I don't know why I'm having a hard time remembering that today.
So here's my question, Dick. What's wrong with the brace I have here on the screen? What's wrong? What's wrong with it?
Which brace?
This one I have highlighted.
I don't know that there's necessarily anything wrong with it except that it's in the direct center, maybe.
Bingo. It's in the center, right?
Okay. I'm like, I can't really tell, but it looks like it might be in the center.
It's in the center, right? And so there's no need to put it in the center.
Yeah.
What are your feelings on doubling up on the baffle?
So here's the deal. There's 2 different ways to get rid of panel resonance in generality terms. One is creating the most mass you possibly can, double baffle, double everything. And we're going to actually talk about constrained layer dampening here. This is, I think, where we're going with this. And then there's also the way of using multiple different ways, which is the way that I recommend, which has to do with, bracing, decoupling from the floor, which we're going to talk about a little bit later. Using something like constrained layer dampening, multiple different ways of doing it. So some people will just use really, really thick MDF. And someone had asked earlier, what are our thoughts on HDF instead of MDF? This once again comes back to exactly what we're talking about here. If you're under the belief that the strongest cabinet material is going to create the least resonance in general, then that is one way that you can help offset those internal resonances. So we've also mentioned, and I want to mention this real quick, these things that we're talking about, like adding bracing, and someone had mentioned, I think it was Mullen Audio before, and said something about dowels or round bracing, which you can use as well. This is something you can add to a speaker that's already pre-built. And you can do, and we're going to be talking about some other things too, that you can actually get more performance out of. And people do it all the time. And there's YouTube channels even about how to make speakers sound better that were designed, I can't say designed poorly. I think most of the time they're designed around cost.
So constrained layer dampening, CLD.
Oh, yeah.
What is, let's ready to go. What is that exactly?
I just realized we're already 40 minutes in. I did not realize we were that far in. Someone said, how long is this stream? Yeah, someone said, how long is this stream?
Hour, as we can stream as long as we're getting super chats. Well, as long as they're coming, we'll keep going.
I mean, this stuff is hard to find in one spot. So constrained layer dampening, this is something car audio guys use. Is something that home audio use. So what do we do with constrained layer dampening? So let me share my screen again. I don't have, well, you know what? I'm not going to share. So imagine this. You have one panel of MDF, 3/4 inch, 1/2 inch, doesn't really matter. Then you have something in between, and then you have another piece of MDF sandwiched in between. Now, the thing in between needs to be something that can break up resonances between this panel of MDF and this panel of MDF. Typically, that's used by the likes of acoustic gel of some kind or acoustic glue of some kind. So like green glue or acoustic X. I put some links down in the description so you can take a look at those different things. So you put that in and then you put the other one in. It's basically the same thing as decoupling like a wall in a home theater environment, right? You decouple it from the other one. so that the transfer of the bass and energy doesn't transfer to the rest of the house. the point of this is to take whatever resonance are transferring on the inside of the box and not transfer to the outside layer.
And I think that's interesting because um, it seems the conventional wisdom is, oh, you shouldn't put some CLD on the inside of a speaker box. I've done that before, and it's not that it's wrong. It works. It does the exact same thing. It adds weight and it absorbs resonance. But what you're saying, and this is the loudspeaker design cookbook, is that the ultimate thing to do is to make a sandwich, some kind of wood, some kind of constrained layer dampening material, and then wood. And that's what your front baffle should look like on your speakers, on your home speakers.
It's one of the ways that you can get more performance out of them. Correct. Another way is another form of constrained layer dampening. This is one that's actually mentioned in the loudspeaker design cookbook, is taking a layer of 1/4 inch plywood, which is much cheaper right now, and 2 layers of drywall and sandwich it between another 1/4 inch piece of plywood and use construction adhesive to glue them all together to make a panel. And that would also be a way of making a cheaper CLD panel.
That would, yeah. I mean, and one thing to remember, if you're thinking about things like sound deadening, I mean, sound deadening oftentimes is just a matter about mass, right? Mass can block sound. And so if you're trying to build a quiet room for whatever reason you might want one, an extra layer of drywall goes a long way.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, that's, and that's a way for you to DIY your own CLD panel. Now no, it's not going to be a 2-hour show. Now you have you guys use CLD and it's already pre-made for you, correct? In the home, in car audio.
Yeah, so go ahead. This is something everyone's seen. This is the back of my truck. This is if you're a patron, you've seen the video already. I uploaded that to Patreon yesterday, and using NVX sound deadening because I can get the 10% DIY Audio 10 coupon code, so I can get it at a good price. It says 90 mil sound deadening, so mil is not millimeter. It's some kind of fraction of an inch, and so this is aluminum foil and butyl rubber. And it just sticks on. And what you want to do is you want to use this on flat surfaces in a car. And you can put this on, say, you pull your door panel off and then you put this stuff on the inside of the outer door skin. And the goal of this stuff is to lower resonance. And what you got to remember about this stuff is it doesn't block sound. It doesn't reduce road noise in any meaningful way. But what it's going to do is it's going to stop panels from vibrating. And that's really important if you've got like a powerful mid-range or mid-bass speaker inside your car door. And you want to just cover every surface you can, especially right around that speaker and around that speaker cutout with this stuff right here to absorb all that vibration so that you're not hearing it. And I've dramatically improved the sound in the vehicle just by saying, hey, it's rattling too much when I crank it up. Let's just cover as much as we can with this stuff.
And that's a form of CLD that's already pre-made. In home theater, you might even stick that in between 2 panels of MDF. I've never done it that way, but I could see that working. Yeah, and someone mentioned Dynamat, which is oh, go ahead.
Yeah, Dynamat's the name brand. It's been around forever. Kind of the first one to do this. My issue with Dynamat is it's the same thing as everything else, but much more expensive. Second Skin makes some, and just about everyone sells it. Well, Amazon has a brand. And so this stuff here on the top is different material. This is the same stuff, but thinner and lighter, but it's covered with basically neoprene, closed cell foam. And the purpose behind it is if you have 2 parts hitting each other, then it's got a foam padding. It doesn't make a lot of noise when it rattles together.
Yeah, that's actually smart. And it is harder, I think, to work within a car because you have all those other things you have to worry about, the rattling, the shaking, the things that, we don't have to worry about so much. Although this is one trick that I do inside my speakers a lot is I'll take that foam material and I'll cut it and I'll put it around my speaker wire when I put it inside the cabinet. So that way it doesn't shake between the bracing and rattle and make noise.
Absolutely.
Jared said, hey, I've used 2 layers of thinner plywood with a thick coat of liquid nails and with sand added in between. And that worked great. That's his own version of constrained layer dampening. Another one that Wharfdale used to do I used to have speakers that did this. Is they basically created, and a lot of people do this, created I guess a form, say 1/4 inch material. I don't know I don't know how thick the material was, and then they poured sand inside it, and then put inside, and that
Oh
was
yeah.
another way of making a really dense cabinet panel to be able to help with
Hit my
resonances.
screen again. I want to address the expensive issue with Dynamat. Again, this is the MBX brand. This is a 40 square foot kit for $100, and if you use my discount code, it's 10% off. It took 2 sheets of this. They're 18 by 32 sheets to do everything you
Oh,
saw on the back of the truck just then.
that's so funny. I
And
did not read this. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Keep going.
oh, the sand layer. Yes, go ahead, read that.
No, I'm so sorry. I did not read this. I shouldn't have interrupted. He said 1950 set of Wharfdale speakers that used sand layer between the walls of the enclosure. Very strange. It's so funny that you say it because those were literally the speakers I was talking about. I actually had some. There's pictures up on my Instagram account actually of it. But that's actually really funny. All right.
All right. The brand of this doesn't matter as long as it's butyl and it's heavy. That's what you're looking for. You can get some stuff from Down for Sound that's like 3 times as thick as this, but you want butyl, you don't want asphalt, and other than that, it's fine. Okay, that's cool.
I never heard of that. Did you?
MDF with Dynamite in between the layers of MDF back in the 90s. I bet it was hard to work with. That's crazy.
I mean, that was a constrained layer dampening right there.
Yep, that's it.
The problem with constrained layer dampening in general is it's heavy. It creates a very heavy speaker. And this is the reason why you don't see a lot of manufacturers doing constrained layer dampening. So a lot of the techniques that we're talking about, some manufacturers do, some people don't. Like, for example, this was one that I was designing. I ended up having to scrap the design, but this one I was designing, and you can see the different layers inside that were designed to break up the standing waves.
See, I thought that's what you're going to show me earlier. So that's kind of cool. I'll put that up on the screen again.
I'm going to try to. So it's kind of hard to see with the light. There you go. You can kind of see them right here. See, they're go in and out in a different direction so that they would help break up standing waves. And you can easily do that. Now, I use this with my laser engraver, and Andy actually said oops, I dropped it. Andy also said he liked my hat. I also did that with my laser engraver. And I found what I think is probably the best value laser engraver on the market. I used it to cut all of these. I put that in the description of the video as well. But you can do all kinds of cool things with like a laser engraver. The only problem is it costs more to do because of the fact that usually you're using thinner material. So you can imagine making a 4-foot high speaker with 1/4 inch material, how many cuts you'd have to make. And they have a limited work area. So there's certain things that you won't be able to do. And this is a great idea, by the way. All right. You know what? You had mentioned multiple times about putting material inside to break up standing waves. What do you want to talk about with that? I feel like we should talk about that one.
Show you something here that's kind of cool. When thinking about a car application, if you're like building pods, if you're putting stuff in a car door, you probably need something. Let's see if I can share the screen again to put in behind that speaker. You want to make sure that the car panel is not vibrating too much, and you want to absorb anything you can that's bouncing around inside the car door. So think of a car door as just a terrible speaker box. And this right here, Vanguard Automotive Design, I think it's in New York. The guy, puts stuff into Ferraris, that kind of thing. Top-notch level work. The guy who behind this company was a big contributor to the DIY mobile audio forums and started making sound dampening material. And this is something Second Skin sells this stuff, hydrophobic melamine foam. And this is a fantastic at both blocking sound and damping sound and breaking up standing waves. And this stuff is really interesting because there's this layer in the middle. That layer is mass-loaded vinyl.
That's awesome.
A pound of that weighs a square foot. No, a square foot of that weighs a pound. And so from a standpoint of blocking road noise, this is probably the absolute most amazing thing on the marketplace, and it is adhesive backed. And I'm hoping to get my hands on some of this. So if you're looking to put stuff in a car door to try to absorb some sound and cut down on the rattles and block noise, I don't think there's anything out there that's it's designed for that. And it's probably one of the best things on the market. Now
The-
it's $300 for a sheet.
isn't the downside to that not just the expense, but the weight, right? It weighs quite a bit.
So yeah, that'll weigh quite a bit. And they have some other products that are going to be lightweight. Like for example, they have this stuff right here, which is a fiber mat that is hydrophobic as well. It's waterproof. Sorry about my slow internet. And I've ordered some of this and I'm looking forward to experimenting with it. It's $100 for a sheet and the sheet's pretty big. So this is something you can use, and you can see in this picture that he's, see if I can get the picture to, it won't get larger. This picture right here, it's lining the inside of a car door. So you basically line the door card with it and inside the car panel, the car door panels, in order to absorb all those waves we were talking about earlier. And because it repels water, it's safe for use in a car door.
And that's an interesting idea. That's actually really cool.
Yeah.
Quick Spect V4D had said, hey, Dan Clark Audio makes some 3D printed honeycomb layer with some of the holes at different depths in this stealth headphone to stop standing waves. I bet that would work well in speakers too. And it probably would, because once again, we're talking about varying these. Someone had also said, hey, look, it's called mass loading. You're trying to dampen vibration. And mass loading is one of the ways that we're talking about getting rid of vibrations in the cabinet, which of course decreases the variations in your SPL, which is what we're trying to do. We're trying to decrease the variations in our SPL as much as possible.
Variations by frequency. Well, you don't want some frequencies to be loud. And in a car door, you don't want some frequencies to make the damn car door vibrate and drown out your sound. So
let's talk about inside like a mid-range cavity or something like that. So like if you're creating a mid-range speaker pod, yes, what are some of the ways that we can, besides the ways that we've already talked about, what can we add inside there to help break up standing waves? Is there anything?
Anything that's kind of fibrous will help. Polyfill, we mentioned earlier. Jute is a fine tool for that as well. Jute is, if you take apart a car door, you will find jute inside cars, like this denim kind of material. Looks kind of like felt. So jute is useful for that kind of thing. It's good old fashioned fiberglass insulation that you go into the attic and just rip out of your attic to put in your speaker box will work. I don't recommend doing that, but it's the same stuff. And those things, again, cash money. Yeah, you can use cash money for that. That's fine. Rip it into shreds and put it in the box. But just basically,
tell me which yours is.
Yeah, it's stuff. It's designed to break up the reflections, and any kind of fibrous material will do that. Obviously, you want things that don't catch fire.
So this is one of those things that is argued about all the time. What is the best? What is the best? And you'll hear all kinds of people saying what is the best. And there have been various tests on it. And it honestly seems like there is no definitive, this is the best. However, the one that usually tests the best is a mixture of two things. The first thing would be some type of acoustic foam on the walls. Think egg crate foam, think sonic barrier, something like that. With the addition of, so 50% of it basically being some type of acoustic foam, and the other 50% being filled with an acoustic fiber, which they sell on Parts Express as well. And there's links down in the description once again. So those two in conjunction with each other usually have the least variation in SPL in general. Once again, we're talking about generalities here, right? Yeah, wool is also a good stuffing material. He's absolutely right. But some type of fiber
as well.
Rock wool is another one. Yep, some type of fiber and some type of acoustic sound dampening foam combined together are usually it. And the thicker the foam, the lower the frequency it will dampen. And so if you're going for like a mid-range cavity, like what you have there, would probably be pretty good.
So I don't want to pick on Parts Express, but a lot of people sell this stuff, and it's the same stuff that was on the back of that NVX stuff I mentioned earlier. This acoustic sound damping foam, and there's a lot of companies that sell a butyl product with this on the back of it. And I feel like it's being misused and marketed, oh, you buy this and cover everything with it and you'll be fine. This foam isn't thick enough. If you're going to use foam, to block or absorb, it needs to be pretty thick.
Yeah, 1 to 2 inches is good.
Especially low frequencies. If you're trying to absorb bass in your door panel and your foam isn't 2 inches thick, you've wasted your time. If you're just using foam.
Yeah, and honestly, I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think even mineral wool, like what we were talking about earlier, like rock wool, I think it's really like 4 inches thick for anything really below like 500 or 200 hertz. So it's thick. It's thick. There's actually something written on the forum. AJC wrote it on the forum and mentioned all about, you know what? No, it may not have been AJC, but it was written on the forum about, what size material you want for what frequencies you're trying to actually filter in. Yeah. Right. 4 inches or more is typically what you want for more of a bass frequency. And that's thick.
Yeah, you're not going to have 4 inches of egg crate, or this stuff right here is rolled up like a yoga mat. It's literally the same stuff they make yoga mats out of. So if you couldn't find it locally, go to Walmart and buy a yoga mat. Find one on closeout at Big Lots or something and get you some yoga mats. But you've got to have a whole lot of this yoga mat material. And really, in a car, its best purpose is where you've got panels bumping against each other and you don't want them to make noise as they collide.
Yeah.
And David K's got some good points about fiberglass and fiberglass getting into your voice coils.
Yeah. And some of that you can just hopefully use with some type of netting or some small film. But in general, fiberglass is very, very, very tiny though. So it'll probably get in there either way. But most of the time you're going to use some type of acoustic fill. But in general, the best is a mixture of both, if you can do it.
Yeah, someone mentioned Tessa tape. My door lock mechanisms, like the little sticks that go from the lock to the latches and stuff, are all just completely wrapped with Tessa tape. And the difference in the rattling, just like the engine just makes them rattle without any, that just the car on it'll rattle, and that saved me so many headaches not having to listen to things rattle. So that's always handy.
All right, I want to mention 2 more things. We have 5 minutes, so I'm going to mention 2 things really quick, and then we're going to get out of here. All right. We've already talked about edge diffraction quite a bit, so not in this video, but in general. But I do want to mention one thing that will help with edge diffraction, get you a better response, whether that be mid-range or tweeter, and that is a chamfer. And when we talk about chamfer, we're talking about a large chamfer. Once again, I talked about the SVS. That can be a compound chamfer, which would be a chamfer that starts out small and gets bigger at the end. Or it can be just a regular chamfer, which is the same size all around, as long as it's a thick chamfer. You need to have multiple front baffles, typically, to have a large chamfer like that. It's the reason why you don't see it on a lot of commercial speakers. And one of the reasons, once again, why I say SVS Ultra tower speaker did a really good job, because they have that compound chamfer on there. They have that slanted rear. By the way, if you don't like the slanted rear or slanted front of a speaker, you can do that internally. All right, you can break up those standing waves internally. You don't have to do it externally necessarily. All right, and then the other thing that I want to talk about, and that does, like I said, that has to be a large bevel. It's not, your bevel that I usually do just to make it look nice. Okay,
right.
The other thing is floor decoupling. That will also help. So putting spikes on your speakers can help decouple it from the floor, or putting the speaker on a really hard surface, something like a piece of granite, something of that nature. You can actually go to the granite store and buy little pieces around, like where they cut the sinks out.
Yeah,
for pretty darn cheap. Sometimes they'll even give it to you. So you can do that as well if you want to put that on there. And that just helps not transfer the sound. Of course, if you're on cement slab, you probably don't even need to worry about that.
That makes sense. I'm going to have to try the sink cutout trick. That might be fun.
Yeah, I actually used to have it's kind of funny because they never knew what to do with the sink cutout. So we lived near a granite place, and they were like, what are we going to do with all these sink cutouts? We have so many. And so what they would always do is they would add it, like say, hey, while we're at it, we're also going to give you a free cutting board if you go with us. And it was a sink cutout. They cut the sink out, and then they just handed you that piece as a cutting board. Here you go.
There's your cutting board.
Here's your cutting board.
Clever.
I did read this. Okay, just so you know. Yeah, that is so funny. But yeah, but you know what? People bought it all the time. They're like, "Oh, I get a free cutting board with this company. I'll go with them." If you own a granite company, there you go. Now you know what to do. Oh, one more thing that we didn't mention that I do want to mention: driver decoupling from the front baffle. You can do that as well with a product called Well Nuts. Basically, what this is trying to do is isolate the speaker frame vibration, and you can try that. I'm going to mention that I linked it down in the description if you want to take a look at it. It's another way that some people try to get a better sound out of it. Whether it works for you.
I've seen those. So if you don't know what well nuts are, imagine a threaded insert that's been threaded into a piece of rubber.
Exactly.
And when you clamp down on it, the rubber gets tighter. And what I don't understand when you screw down, the rubber gets tighter. What I don't understand is I don't understand how you can have something that can connect the speaker to the box and decouple at the same time. And so I scratch my head looking at that, trying to figure out the physics of it.
I don't know. Once again, all of these things combined will make the speaker sound better, right? So it's not one thing or another thing. You know, it's not bracing only. It's not foam only. It's not speaker shape only. It's a mixture of all of them. It's a mixture of where you place the speakers. It's a mixture, which we didn't talk about a lot about edge diffraction, but you can watch that video once again. It's a matter of where you put the bracing, how much bracing you put in. It's a matter of what type of foam are you going to put in there. Those types of things, chamfering the edges, like we said, all of these things added together is what's going to give you the best sound. So if you already own some speakers, you already made some speakers or something like that, start with some of these things that you can do. Add some of those braces that we showed you, just like the horizontal braces to break it up. Add some cross braces in there if you don't have any. Add, some horizontal, like some non-parallel braces. Add those types of things and see what happens.
It should be fairly easy to add some of those triangle braces in, and just the ones that in essence are weights on the walls. And also those, of course, will, they'll keep the panel from resonating, but they'll also break up waves inside the box.
Yep. And decouple it with some speaker spikes. Those are, if you have enough room to do some beveled edges, go right ahead. Those types of things are things that you can do already. And then the other things are things that you'll want to add and think about later, like maybe constrained layer dampening. That's going to be harder to do to a box that's already built. I'm not going to say it's not doable, but it's harder. Is there anything we did not get to that you want to get to?
We hit everything on my list.
Everything on your, wow.
My whole list.
Believe it or
not, what do you got coming up on your channel, Nick? What's for your what do you have in the future of your channel?
So I just wrote or I didn't write. I just shot a video on I did write it as well because I wrote it for an article for the website, but I haven't published or done anything with it yet. For crossover. So a lot of people have said, hey, what do the crossover components do? What's the basics of a crossover? What are these things? So this will be kind of an introduction to crossover design. So that's coming up on there. I also have this speaker that I'm building right now that I showed you guys kind of the outside and inside edges of that. This speaker is going to be coming out this week. So that'll be a really cool design. I'm excited about that. And for my patrons, they already know about this. This is one that might be a few weeks out still. But this is the perfect center channel. This will give you a sneak peek of what it's going to look like.
All right.
So
pretty cool perfect stuff. Center channel.
Yeah. Our goal is to create a horizontal MTM, but not have the issues that most people have with the off-axis response. And I think this design is what's going to do it. And if not, we're at least going to learn, hopefully, what went wrong.
So sometimes that's the right, learning what went wrong sometimes is the best part. So coming up on my channel, I have started in earnest on building the base truck, and so I've taken the back seat out of the vehicle, and I've uploaded the first video in that build series to YouTube as a private video, and my patrons have already seen it. So next week, the whole world can see the mess I made taking the back seat of my truck out, and a really good sound deadening test to kind of show how to block road noise and how these different products are better or worse for blocking road noise.
That's pretty cool. I can't wait to see that. That sounds awesome.
Well, you don't think about it, but your back seat is a thick piece of foam, and foam blocks noise. So you pull the back seat out, it gets louder. So you've got to do some extra work to sound deaden, or else the vehicle is unbearable to drive. So,
okay, so let me ask you a question. Do you like to save money?
absolutely, yes.
Okay. If you or anyone else listening likes to save money and you shop at Parts Express, use the code TOID, TOID, like this without the S, and you'll save 5% off of anything that you buy there, at least as far as I know. So use the code TOID, save yourself some money.
Fantastic. I'm glad to hear that you've been set up with the code at Parts Express.
Use it. 5% off for the win, says Baba. And you're right. 5% off, especially some of the things that don't ever go on sale, is really nice.
Right. Because there's stuff that never goes on sale.
There are, like the Omni mic and like DATs and like
right.
all the other things. So yeah, just go ahead and use that code. You'll get 5% off, save some money. And that's just a way to thank you guys that have been loyal to this channel. So I appreciate everything you guys are doing too. If you use the code Justin, they actually charge you an extra 5%.
Unfortunately, that is true. So that's just how it goes sometimes.
As far as I know, the code TOID only works at Parts Express for now. So there might be more coming later, but right now TOID works the Parts Express only. If you want to purchase other things, I don't know if I can help you. All right. Well, I'm looking forward to that video. Actually, I want to see the road noise one because I'm interested, because I have a truck that's very old that I'd like to do some things to, just because I can, because I don't care about it anymore. So like, why not? Right. So maybe I'll do something with that. All right. Anything else you want to say before we go, Justin?
No, nothing.
All right, guys. This is Toyd's DIY Audio and Justin on Sound Advice. We're out.